Hey, what's up guys? Hope you're all doing well, and today I'm finally getting around to making some custom sleeved cables for my editing and gaming system in the Ghost S1. I love small form factor cases for their space efficiency, however dealing with cable management is always an added challenge that is a lot more forgiving in larger builds. So essentially what I'm doing today is making a set of custom length sleeved cables to replace the stock black cables which don't look as good, but more importantly are just totally the wrong length. So ever since I reviewed the Ghost S1 small form factor case, I've been using it to house my editing and gaming machine. I've got the Noctua NHL12 in there, calling a delidded 8700K. That's locked into the ASRock Z390 Phantom motherboard, which I also recently reviewed. And on the flip side, I've got my GTX 1080 Ti SC2 from EVGA. So overall, really happy with this build, except for those cables. The power supply that I'm using is Corsair's SF600. It's a pretty popular option for powerful ITX builds, and honestly, you can make do with those stock SFX cables that come with it, especially since most ITX cases do not have a window panel like the Ghost S1. It's kind of questionable why you even care about custom sleeved cables in the first place, since you won't be able to see them with all the panels closed. For me at least, it's more about satisfaction and peace of mind. It's a nice little weekend project for myself, and also because I have mild OCD. Now, I've already done a complete guide on how to create custom sleeved cables, so this won't be much of a guide or a how-to video, but rather just taking you guys through the process. However, there is one thing that I do want to touch on and expand on here, and you guys have been asking me to go over it, and that's the actual wiring between the power supply and your components. So as an example, the ATX plug for your motherboard is a 24-pin plug, but that same cable terminates as a 10-pin plug and an 18-pin plug on the power supply end. So how do you know which wires go where? The easiest way is to track each wire from one end to the other from the stock cable. This way you'll have a map of exactly how to replicate that cable when you make your own. The other way is to jump online, find a pinout diagram of your specific brand and model of power supply, and then create the wiring map yourself. The Corsair SF600 is a pretty popular option, so I trust the resources online, but I do recommend double checking the pin voltages with a multimeter if you're not sure. You can also find the pinouts for all of the component sides online. They're pretty common, and that should give you enough to construct a diagram and get started. So here's an example of the pinout diagram that I'm using today that I made in Excel. It shows both the power supply side and the component side for all of the cables that I'm making today, and which wire connects to which pins on both plugs. Make sure to triple check this pinout before beginning as well, because if you do manage to wire up the wrong pins, you may cause damage to your components. And lastly, the sleeving that I'm using is PET sleeving from MDPCX. I've been using this for pretty much all of my builds, and I honestly cannot recommend it highly enough. What I love about this sleeving is that it holds its shape extremely well, which gives that super solid and rigid look. Alright, so all of the equipment is ready and we're ready to get started, and I've already explained all of the tools here and how to use them in my initial guide. So without wasting any more time, let's get started. Alright, so the GPU power cables are done, both the 6-pin and the 8-pin. They turned out pretty good too. However, there is one problem. There's just one problem with one cable, and that's the double cable that you guys can see here. I'm not sure how well you can see that handheld, but I'll throw some B-roll up. Basically, with the double wire, I made the two wires that were coming out of the one wire, so the split cable, I made them both the same length. And when you have a 180 degree bend like this, of course it's the outer wire that has to be
a bit longer than the one on the inside. So of course, if you make them both the same length, there's going to be some sort of conflict and whatnot, which is what we've got here. So all of the other cables are pretty much perfect as far as I'm concerned, but then you've got these two right on the end, which sort of mess it all up. So I'm going to redo those real quick.
Cable combs, by the way, are very helpful to hold the cables together and give that nice clean look. The ones I'm using here I modeled and 3D printed, so let me know if you guys would like me to drop the files down below. So here's what the stock 8-pin CPU cable looked like. And there's our custom CPU cable for the Ghost S1. It's probably one of the better custom cables that I've created. And the CPU cables for Corsair power supplies, or at least the SF600, are quite easy to make because you've just got the ground pins and the 12-volt pins flipped on either plug. So essentially what we've done is we've just made a straight cable from one end to the other, and then we've just flipped the plugs on either side. So we get this nice straight cable here, which looks quite nice. So that's what that looks like there, no extra length, and looks quite tidy. The next order of business will be making that 24-pin cable, and I've kind of been putting this one off because I know it's going to be the hardest one. So let's get to work on that one. So the motherboard 24-pin cable is done, and I have to admit it probably is one of the better 24-pin cables that I've constructed. They always usually do end up quite a bit messy, especially for small form factor builds. So as you can see there, it does look, relatively tidy, a lot better than the stock cable. And we are almost done now. We've just got 2 cables left. Now we just have to do the 2.5-inch drive cable that's down here, so that's the SATA power cable. And I'm also going to re-sleeve the front power button, which is otherwise too short for the Ghost S1. So we'll do those now and we'll finally be finished. And the finished result is far beyond what I thought I could ever achieve in such a tiny space. I'm especially happy with that 24-pin motherboard cable, which is very easy to mess up given the two 90-degree bends, but I couldn't be happier with how it turned out. The 1TB SSD is also in the perfect position directly underneath that 6-pin cable that it connects to. So I'd love to know what you guys think of my cable work in the Ghost S1, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave those down below as well. Also, I will be leaving all of the links for all of the tools and supplies that I use to create these cables, so if you guys want to do a similar project for your builds, even if it's an ATX build, of course, the cables will just be longer, they're the same supplies, same materials, so feel free to check those links out down below. Also, if you do have a small form factor build and you don't want to go through all of the trial and error of an hours of creating something like this, I will have a link down below of one of my trusty sources where you can buy a very similar set of cables like the ones we were looking at today. And so if you do want to create something like this yourself, just be prepared for the sheer amount of work that it's going to take. I mean, it's probably not worth it, especially because the side panels and everything are closed. You can't even see it. So unless you're, completely mental like myself, or you have OCD, then, probably not worth it. You're probably just better off buying a set from one of the links down below. There's also no functional benefit to doing this. You're not going to get a measurable improvement in CPU or GPU thermals, so let's just get that out of the way. It's completely an aesthetic transformation for your build, just taking it that extra step in terms of aesthetics and looks. Anyway guys, as always, a huge thanks for watching. This is our last video on the channel for 2018, so a huge thanks to the 50 to 60,000 people who have subscribed this year alone. It's been amazing, and I can't wait to see what we can do in 2019. As always guys, if you haven't subscribed already, consider doing that down below, and I'll see you all in the next one.